The wife secretly worked as a maid at a hotel. One day, while cleaning a room, she was shocked to find her husband with his mistress. Eleanor Miller ran her fingers across the freshly pressed shirt, smoothing the collar exactly as her husband Richard liked it. After 25 years of marriage, these small tasks had become second nature to her. She placed the shirt in the closet with the others, all arranged by color and season, just as Richard preferred. The afternoon sun streamed through the bedroom windows of their large suburban home. Eleanor glanced at the clock, 3:30 p.m. She had finished her household chores early today, as she did most days now that their 3 children had grown up and moved away. "What now?" she whispered to herself, a question that seemed to echo through her days lately. She walked downstairs to the spotless kitchen and began planning dinner, even though she already knew Richard would call around 5 to say he was working late. Again, at 52, Eleanor still maintained her appearance well, her hair colored regularly to hide the gray, her figure still trim from hours spent cleaning and maintaining their home. Sometimes she caught her reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Eleanor hadn't always been a housewife. Before marrying Richard, she had worked as a marketing coordinator at a growing advertising firm. She had been good at her job, organized, creative, respected by her colleagues. She had dreams of becoming a department director someday. But Richard had different ideas about marriage. "A wife should be home taking care of the family," he'd said shortly after their wedding. "My mother raised us while my father provided. That's how it should be." Eleanor had tried to argue, to explain that she loved her work, that it gave her purpose and satisfaction, but Richard was firm. "What's the point of my success if my wife needs to work? People will think I can't provide." His pride was at stake, and Eleanor, deeply in love and believing marriage required sacrifice, had finally given in. She had handed in her resignation, packed up her desk, and said goodbye to her colleagues. She'd told herself it was temporary, just until they had children. Then Richard's career took off, and they started their family. Jason came first, then Emma 2 years later, and finally Lily. The children became her world, and for many years they were enough. The loss of her career stung less when she was busy with school activities, birthday parties, and the daily chaos of raising 3 kids. But now the children were gone. Jason lived across the country with his wife and new baby. Emma was finishing medical school. Lily was in her 2nd year of college. The big house was quiet, and Eleanor found herself with nothing but time. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello? Eleanor, it's Margaret. Are we still on for coffee tomorrow morning?" Her friend's cheerful voice was a welcome break in the silence of the house. "Of course," Eleanor replied. 10 o'clock at the corner cafe?" "Perfect. I have something to tell you. Might be interesting. See you then." After hanging up, Eleanor set the dining table for one and prepared a simple dinner. Richard had texted, as expected, saying he would be late. No explanation needed anymore. Their marriage had grown colder over the years. Richard had become more distant, more absorbed in his work and business dinners. The affectionate husband who once brought her flowers for no reason now barely looked at her when they spoke. Sometimes weeks passed without him touching her. Eleanor wondered if he even saw her anymore, or if she had simply become another fixture in the house he had bought, like the expensive sofa or the carefully selected artwork. Later that evening, while watching the local news, Eleanor opened the household ledger. Every expense was recorded neatly: groceries, utilities, home repairs. Richard gave her a monthly allowance for household expenses, but anything personal required discussion. This dependence on him for money was perhaps the hardest part of giving up her career. Having to ask for everything, to justify small purchases, made her feel like a child rather than a partner. Last month, she had asked about taking a photography class at the community college. "What for?" Richard had asked, without looking up from his newspaper. "You already have that expensive camera I bought you for Christmas. Why waste money on classes?" "I just thought it might be nice to learn properly, maybe meet some new people," she had ventured. Richard had lowered his paper then, fixing her with a look that mixed confusion and irritation. "You want to work? Is that what this is about? We've discussed this, Eleanor. We don't need the money, and what would people think? That I can't provide for my wife? That the great Richard Miller needs his wife to work like a college student?" "It's just a hobby class, Richard, not a job. Today it's a class, tomorrow it's a part-time job. Then what? No, Eleanor. We agreed when we got married. I provide, you take care of the home. That's the arrangement." An arrangement she had never truly wanted, but had accepted out of love, and a desire to make her marriage work. An arrangement that now felt like a prison. Eleanor closed the ledger, feeling the walls of her beautiful home pressing in around her. "They're hiring housekeepers at the Grand Wellington," Margaret whispered over coffee the next morning, leaning forward with excitement in her eyes. Eleanor nearly choked on her latte. "Housekeepers? At the hotel downtown?" Margaret nodded. "The pay is decent, hours are flexible. My neighbor's sister started there last month and loves it." "Margaret, be serious. Richard would never allow it. You know how he feels about me working." "Who says Richard needs to know?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You've been telling me for months how lonely you are, how you need something of your own. This could be it." Eleanor stirred her coffee slowly. "Work as a hotel maid behind my husband's back. That's crazy." "Is it?" Margaret challenged. "Crazier than spending the next 20 years staring at your living room walls? You were a smart, capable woman when I met you in college, Eleanor. That woman is still in there somewhere." The women had been friends since their university days. Margaret had never married, focusing instead on her career as a librarian. Eleanor had often envied her friend's freedom, though she rarely admitted it. "Richard gives me everything I need," Eleanor said weakly. "Except permission to be a person," Margaret replied. "I've watched you shrink over the years, Eleanor. You used to light up a room. Now you barely smile. Is that really the life you want?" The idea took root. A week later, Eleanor sat across from Mrs. Patel, the housekeeping director, in a small office at the back of the Grand Wellington Hotel. The hotel was the finest in the city, with its marble lobby and crystal chandeliers. "Your application says you have no experience in housekeeping," Mrs. Patel noted, looking over her glasses at Eleanor. "No, but I've managed my own home for 25 years, Eleanor replied. "I'm hard-working, detail-oriented, and I learn quickly." Mrs. Patel studied her for a moment. "Many people think hotel housekeeping is simple, but it requires precision, efficiency, and sometimes dealing with unpleasant situations. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. "We can start you 3 days a week, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Would that schedule work for you?" Eleanor thought of the lie she had prepared for Richard, a book club that met 3 times a week. He'd never question it, especially since he barely asked about her days anymore. "Yes," she answered. "That would be perfect." 3 weeks later, Eleanor received her first paycheck. It wasn't much, far less than she had earned in her marketing job before marriage, but the money was entirely her own. With Margaret's help, she opened a separate bank account at a credit union across town. "Just until I figure out what I really want," she told herself, though she wasn't sure what that might be anymore. The work was physically demanding. Her back and shoulders ached after the first few shifts, and her hands grew red and rough despite the gloves. But there was something satisfying about transforming chaotic, messy rooms into ordered, clean spaces. Her supervisor quickly noticed her attention to detail and began assigning her to the more demanding guests. Surprisingly, Eleanor found friendship among her co-workers, women from different backgrounds with their own stories. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt truly seen and accepted, not as Richard's wife or the children's mother, but as herself, a woman with her own struggles and dreams. At home, Richard barely noticed the changes in her routine. Their conversations, already limited to household matters, and brief updates about their adult children, grew even more superficial. Some evenings, he didn't return until she was already in bed, the faint smell of expensive whiskey, and occasionally an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Eleanor pretended not to notice, unsure which would be worse, knowing for certain or confronting the truth. 3 months into her secret employment, Eleanor was preparing to end her shift when her supervisor's voice crackled over the radio. "Eleanor, can you cover for Diane on the executive floor today? She's out sick, and we've got an emergency cleaning request in room 403. "On my way," she responded, gathering fresh supplies and wheeling her cart toward the elevator. Room 403 was at the far end of the 4th-floor hallway, one of the luxury suites with a view of the city skyline. Following protocol, Eleanor knocked 3 times, calling out, "Housekeeping!" When no one answered, she used her master key and pushed the heavy door open. The suite was in disarray, champagne glasses on the coffee table, clothing scattered across the floor, the bed unmade. As she began collecting the items, she heard the bathroom door open. Richard emerged wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, his hair still wet from the shower. He was looking back over his shoulder, saying something to someone still in the bathroom. When he turned forward, his eyes met Eleanor's, and he froze. "Eleanor!" Richard's voice cracked with disbelief. A young woman appeared behind him, wrapped in a hotel bathrobe. She was beautiful, perhaps 25, with long hair and smooth skin. She looked between them with confusion. "You know the maid?" she asked Richard. "My wife," Richard said flatly, his initial shock rapidly transforming into anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" Eleanor's hands gripped the handle of her cart so tightly her knuckles whitened, yet her voice, when she finally spoke, was surprisingly steady. "I work here, Richard, 3 days a week while you think I'm at book club." She paused, looking directly at the young woman, who was now backing away uncomfortably. "The better question is, what are you doing here?" "With her?" Richard stood motionless for a moment, then grabbed his pants from a nearby chair and stepped into them, hastily. "You've been working as a hotel maid?" he asked, his voice low and filled with disgust. "Do you have any idea how this looks? What people would say if they knew my wife was cleaning hotel rooms?" Eleanor stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. "That's what you're concerned about? Your image? Not that I just caught you with a woman half my age?" "This is different," he snapped, buttoning his shirt with angry, fumbling fingers. "And it's temporary. What you've done is deliberately deceive me for months. Working behind my back, lying to me." The irony of his accusation might have made Eleanor laugh if the situation weren't so painful. Instead, she straightened her uniform and adjusted the cart. "I'll see you at home, Richard," she said quietly. "We clearly have much to discuss." She wheeled her cart out, closing the door quietly behind her. In the quiet of the corridor, Eleanor's composure finally crumbled. Tears blurred her vision as she pushed the cart toward the service area, her mind reeling with images of Richard and the young woman. She was so distracted she didn't notice someone walking toward her until the cart collided with them. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, kneeling quickly to retrieve the cleaning supplies that had fallen from the cart's lower shelf. "Please, let me help you," said a male voice. A middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes knelt beside her, helping to gather the scattered items. "Rough day?" he asked gently, handing her a stack of washcloths. "You could say that," Eleanor managed, embarrassed by her tears and the mascara she could feel streaking down her cheeks. "I'm Thomas Reynolds," he said, offering his hand after they had both stood up. Something in his gentle tone made Eleanor meet his eyes. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for both the help and the unexpected kindness. "Take care of yourself," he replied with a small smile before continuing down the hallway. Eleanor finished her shift mechanically, her mind replaying the scene in room 403 over and over. Mrs. Patel noticed her distress but didn't pry, simply saying, "Whatever it is, remember that every storm eventually passes." That evening, Eleanor sat in the living room when Richard finally arrived home. She had changed out of her uniform, taken a long shower, and prepared herself for the confrontation to come. He entered with an air of controlled anger, his lawyer face firmly in place. "I spoke with the hotel manager," he announced without preamble. "You don't need to return. I've explained that there was a misunderstanding about your employment." Eleanor stared at him. "You got me fired?" Without even talking to me first. "Be reasonable, Eleanor," Richard said, pouring himself a whiskey from the bar cart. "This little adventure of yours has gone far enough. It ends now before anyone finds out." "And your adventure?" she asked quietly. "Does that end too?" Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Let's not mix issues. Men have certain needs. It doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with us." "Nothing to do with us," Eleanor repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Just like my need for purpose, for some independence, had nothing to do with us? Because you decided that without even asking me?" "I've given you everything." Richard's voice rose. "This house, financial security, a good life. And how do you thank me? By humiliating me, working as a maid, spying on me." "I wasn't spying, Richard. I was cleaning rooms to earn my own money, to feel useful again." She took a deep breath. "I want a divorce." Richard had been pacing, but at this he stopped and stared at her before laughing incredulously. "A divorce? Don't be ridiculous. You're 52 years old. You clean hotel rooms. Who would want you now?" He took a drink, studying her over the rim of his glass. "You'll crawl back within a month when you realize you can't afford your precious coffee dates with Margaret." His words were meant to wound, to remind her of her dependency. Instead, they crystallized everything wrong with their marriage, how he valued her only as a possession, an extension of his own image. "I'll be staying with Margaret tonight," she said, rising from her chair. "I'll arrange to collect my things later." "Eleanor, don't be dramatic." But she was already walking to the door where she had left a small overnight bag. For the first time in decades, she closed the door on Richard, rather than waiting for him to close it on her. 6 months later, Eleanor placed a small vase of fresh daisies on her desk, in the office adjoining the housekeeping department of the Grand Wellington Hotel. After Richard's attempt to have her fired, Mrs. Patel had stood by her, impressed not only by Eleanor's work ethic, but by her honesty in explaining the situation. "Your husband does not decide who works in my department," Mrs. Patel had said firmly. "That is my decision, and I value good workers." When the assistant manager position opened up 2 months later, Mrs. Patel had encouraged her to apply. "You have management experience from your previous career," she had pointed out, "and you understand both the practical and personal challenges of housekeeping. You're perfect for this role." The promotion had come with a modest raise and, more importantly, recognition of her skills and abilities. Her new responsibilities included staff scheduling, inventory management, and handling guest concerns, skills that had lain dormant but not disappeared during her years as a housewife. Eleanor smiled. The divorce proceedings had been difficult, Richard alternating between pleading for reconciliation and threatening financial ruin, but her children had rallied around her once they understood the full situation. Initially shocked by their mother working as a hotel housekeeper, they had quickly recognized her need for independence and supported her decision to end the marriage. With the help of a lawyer recommended by Margaret, Eleanor had secured a fair settlement. It wasn't the lifestyle she had known with Richard, but her small apartment near downtown was comfortable and, most importantly, entirely hers. She had finally taken that photography class, and her first exhibition, portraits of the hotel's diverse staff, would open at a local gallery the following month. The hardest part of leaving Richard hadn't been the loss of luxury or status. It had been confronting the reality that she had given up so much of herself to please a man who had never truly seen her. All those years of suppressing her desires, of asking permission for small freedoms, of pretending his coldness didn't hurt, they had slowly eroded her sense of self. Building it back had been a daily effort, sometimes painful, but always worthwhile. As she finished her shift and walked through the hotel lobby that evening, she noticed a familiar face at the bar. Thomas Reynolds, the kind stranger who had helped her on that fateful day. He looked up as she passed and smiled in recognition. "Well, hello there," he said. "I hope things have improved since our last encounter," he said. "You seem different, more peaceful." "Life has changed completely," she acknowledged, "for the better, though the path wasn't easy." "I'm in town for a business conference," he explained. "Would you perhaps join me for dinner one evening? I'd love to hear how things turned out for you." 6 months earlier, Eleanor might have declined, defining herself solely in relation to her failed marriage. But the woman who stood before him now understood her own worth and the value of new beginnings. "I'd like that very much," she said, accepting his business card. "I have quite a story to tell." As they arranged to meet the following evening, Eleanor realized that the end of her marriage hadn't been an ending at all, but rather the first step toward becoming the person she was meant to be. Her life was smaller now in some ways. A modest apartment instead of a suburban mansion, a mid-level hotel job instead of a wealthy husband, but infinitely larger in the ways that truly mattered. And most importantly, she had discovered that it's never too late to begin again, to reclaim the parts of yourself that have been set aside, but never truly lost. And that's the end of today's story. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. See you in the next one.